course to avoid association with those practicing false worship and immorally inclined persons, for these entrap one in sin and spoil useful habits. X 23, 33, NE 13, 25, 26, PS 26, 9-11, PR 1, 10-19, EC 7, 26, 1 Co 15, 33, 34. There are, of course, many things that can be done or not done, or that can be done one way or another, without any condemnation of sin. Compare 1 Co 7, 27, 28. God did not hem man in with multitudinous instructions governing minute details as to how things were to be done. Clearly, man was to use his intelligence, and he was also given ample latitude to display his individual personality and preferences. The law covenant contained many statutes. Yet even this did not rob men of their freedom of personal expression. Christianity, with its strong emphasis on love of God and neighbor as the guiding rule, similarly allows men the widest possible freedom that persons with righteously inclined hearts could desire. Compare Mount 22, 37-40, Row 8, 21. See freedom. Jehovah God of moral standards. Sin, 2. A name applying to a wilderness and a city. 1. A wilderness region to which the Israelites, approximately 1 month after their exodus from Egypt, transferred after leaving Elim, and a campsite by the Red Sea. After this wilderness, there were several more campsites, including Dophkah, Alush, and Rephidim, before they came to Sinai. X 16. 1. 17. 1. New 33. 9-15. It was in the wilderness of Sin that murmuring and complaints arose in the camp, because of the lack of meat. Here Jehovah caused a flock of quail to cover the camp, and here the Israelites ate manna for the first time. It was also at this point that the Sabbath law was put into effect. X 16. 2-30. The exact location of the wilderness of Sin is uncertain, though it is obviously along the border of the Sinai Peninsula. Geographers generally favor the sandy tract known as Debit Ramla, lying along the foot of the Sinai Plateau. This desert plain is also near the suggested site of Dophkah. 2. Sin was among the cities of Egypt due to feel the sword brought on that land by the hand of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. As 30. 6, 10, 15, 16. It is called the fortress of Egypt. Some authorities today accept the identification Pelusium found in the Latin Vulgate. Pelusium was an ancient fortress city situated in a key defense position against invasion from the Asiatic continent. Its location is generally accepted to coincide with present-day Tel El Faram, a site about 32 kilometers 20 miles of Port Said on the Mediterranean Sea coast. Caravans or armies coming down the Philistine coast thus found this fortress guarding the entrance to Egypt. Assyrian king Ashurbanipal refers to it in his annals. Today Textoi acute Miritra Longo, Sinai 972 observed the phenomena on the mountaintop. In fact, they could withdraw and stand at a distance. Even from the camp itself the top of Mount Sinai was visible. X 19. 17, 18. 20. 18. 24. 17. Compare to 5. 30. Identification. The exact location of Mount Sinai, or Horeb, is uncertain. Tradition links it with a red granite ridge centrally situated in the southern part of the Sinai Peninsula between the two northern arms of the Red Sea. This ridge measures about 3 kilometers to me from NWHS and has two peaks, Ras Safer and Jebel Musa. The area in which this ridge lies is well watered by several streams. In front of the northern peak Ras Safer lies the plain of Araha, having an approximate length of 3 kilometers to me and extending about 1 kilometer 0.6 mi in width. Picture, Volume 1, p. 540. Based on his observations at the site in the 19th century, A.P. Stanley writes, that such a plain should exist at all in front of such a cliff is so remarkable a coincidence with the sacred narrative, as to furnish a strong internal argument, not merely of its identity with the scene, but of the scene itself having been described by an eyewitness. Commenting on the descent of Moses and Joshua from Mount Sinai, he states. Anyone coming down from one of the secluded basins behind the Ras Sefer, through the oblique gullies which flank it on the north and south, would hear the sounds borne through the silence from the plain, but would not see the plain itself till he emerged from the Wadi el-Dir or the Wadi Laya. And when he did so, he would be immediately under the precipitous cliff of Sefer. Stanley further observes that Moses throwing the dust of the golden calf into the torrent that was descending from the mountain to 9:21 would also fit this area, saying, this would be perfectly possible in the Wadi Rahab, into which issues the brook of the Wadi Laya, descending, it is true, from Mount St. Catherine, but still in sufficiently close connection with the Jebel Mawza to justify the expression, coming down out of the mount. Sinai and Palestine, 1885, pages 107-109. The traditional view is that Mount Sinai may be identified with the loftier southern peak Jebel Mawza, meaning Mountain of Moses. However, numerous scholars concur with Stanley's view that the northern peak, Ras Sefer, is more likely, there being no extensive plain in front of Jebel Mawza. Events. Near Mount Sinai, or Horeb, Jehovah's angel appeared to Moses in the burning thorn bush and commissioned him to lead the enslaved Israelites out of Egypt. Acts 3. 1-10. Acts 7. 30. Probably about a year later the liberated nation arrived at Mount Sinai. Acts 19. 2. Here Moses ascended the mountain, evidently to receive further instruction from Jehovah, since it had already been revealed to him at the burning thorn bush that on this mountain they would serve the true God. Acts 3. 12. 19. 3. Moses was then directed to tell the people that their strict obedience to Jehovah's word and covenant would result in their becoming a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Acts 19. 5, 6. The older men, as representatives of the entire nation, agreed to do this. Jehovah then instructed Moses to sanctify the people so that they might meet him on the third day thereafter. Bounds were set around the mountain, because anyone touching it, whether man or beast, was to die. Acts 19. 10-15. On the morning of the third day, thunders and lightnings began occurring, and a heavy cloud upon the mountain and a very loud sound of a horn. The people in the camp trembled. Moses then brought them from the camp to the base of the mountain to meet the true God. Mount Sinai rocked and smoked all over. Acts 19. 16-19. PS 68. 8. At God's invitation Moses went up the mountain and again was instructed to impress upon the people that they must not try to ascend. Even the priests, not the Levites, but apparently Israelite males who, O textoi acute muritra longo, singleness 973. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai he related Jehovah's words to the people, and they again expressed their willingness to be obedient. Thereafter he wrote down the words of God and early the next morning built an altar and erected 12 pillars at the foot of the mountain. Burnt sacrifices and communion sacrifices were offered, and with the blood of the sacrificial victims the law covenant was inaugurated. Acts 24. 3-8. Job 9. 16-22. Having come into a covenant relationship with Jehovah, the Israelites, through their representatives, were able to draw near to Mount Sinai. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the older men of Israel went partway up the mountain and saw a magnificent vision of God's glory. Acts 24. 9-11. Afterward Moses, accompanied by Joshua, ascended the mountain, this time to receive further commands and the stone tablets containing the 10 words. Not until the 7th day, however, was Moses invited to enter the cloud. It seems that Joshua continued to wait for Moses on the mountain, at a point where he could neither see nor hear anything that occurred in the Israelite camp. Acts 24. 12-18. However, whether Joshua, like Moses, did not eat or drink for the entire 40-day period is not stated. As Moses and Joshua at the end of this period descended Mount Sinai they could hear the festive singing in the Israelite camp. From the foot of Mount Sinai, Moses caught sight of the golden calf and the festivities. Immediately he threw down the 2 stone tablets, shattering them at the foot of the mountain. Acts 32. 15-19. Job 12. 18-21. Later, Moses was instructed to make 2 stone tablets like those he had shattered and again ascend Mount Sinai, in order to have the 10 words recorded thereon. Acts 34. 1-3. 10. 1-4 Moses spent another 40 days on the mountain without eating or drinking. To make this possible, he doubtless received divine assistance. X34. 28. Apparently this is the same 40-day period as that mentioned at 9. 18. Compare X34. 4, 5, 8. 10. 10. From the time that the tabernacle, or tent of meeting, was erected and the cloud began to cover it, divine communication no longer came directly from Mount Sinai, but from the tent of meeting set up in its vicinity. X40. 34, 35. The 1. 1. 25. 1. New 1. 1. 9. 1. Centuries later the prophet Elijah traveled to Horeb, or Sinai, the mountain of the true God. 1 Kai 19. 8. 2. Sinai also designates the wilderness adjacent to the mountain by the same name. 7. 38 The exact geographic limits of the wilderness of Sinai cannot be determined from the Bible record. It was apparently located near Ephadim. X19. 2. Compare X17. 1-6. It was to the wilderness of Sinai that Moses' father-in-law Jethro brought Moses' wife Zipporah and his 2 sons Gershom and Eliezer, for them to be reunited with Moses. X18. 1-7 Among other noteworthy events occurring in the wilderness of Sinai were Israel's succumbing to calf worship during Moses' absence. X32. 1-8 The execution of 3,000 men who undoubtedly had a major part in calf worship. X32. 26-28 Israel's outward expression of repentance by stripping themselves of their ornaments. X33. 6 The construction of the tabernacle and its furnishings and the making of the priestly garments. X36. 8. 39. 43 The installation of the priesthood in the beginning of its services at the tabernacle. 8. 4. 9. 24. New 28. 6 The execution of Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu by fire from Jehovah for offering illegitimate fire. 10. 1-3 The first registration of Israelite males for the army. New 1. 1-3 And the initial celebration of the Passover outside Egypt. New 9. 1-5 Sinew, a tendon of the body. Man is said to be woven together with bones and sinews. Job 10. 11. See also Job 40. 15-18. During Jacob's grappling with an angel, the angel touched the socket of Jacob's thigh joint, causing it to get out of place. The account written later by Moses says, O textoi acute miritra longo, Shinim, land of 974 man to continue by himself. I am going to make a helper for him, as a compliment of him. GE2. 18, 21-24 Thereafter, marriage was the normal way of life among mankind, and exceptions were rare and were for special reasons. See marriage. One such special case was that of Jeremiah. He was under divine command to remain single and not to father children, since there were desperate circumstances coming on that nation in which children would be ruthlessly slaughtered by a cruel conqueror. Jah 16. 1-4 Jephthah's daughter was another exception. Out of respect for her father's vow, she willingly remained single in full-time service at Jehovah's house. JG 11. 34-40. The Apostle Paul discussed the benefits of singleness, provided one is not under excessive pressure, not inflamed with passion and therefore in danger of committing fornication. The course of singleness is better in that it allows one to serve God without distraction. 1 Cor 7. 1, 2, 8, 9, 29-38. 9. 5 Whether the 4 daughters of Philip the Evangelist married later in life is not stated, but at the time Luke wrote his account they were mentioned as virgins, that prophesied. Act 21. 8, 9. Christ Jesus, like Jeremiah, remained unmarried. In conversation with his disciples about the question of whether singleness was to be preferred over the state of marriage, Jesus said, Not all men make room for the saying, but only those who have the gift. and there are eunuchs that have made themselves eunuchs on account of the kingdom of the heavens. Let him that can make room for it make room for it. Mount 19. 10-12. Singleness, then, is a gift having as its basic advantage the freedom afforded the possessor. Jesus here used figurative language. Men make room for it, not by literal self-emasculation, but in their hearts, by willingly resolving to keep themselves physically in the unmarried state, whether for a lifetime or for a more limited period of time, maintaining this status by self-control. The teaching and practice of compulsory celibacy by certain religious sects, however, finds no support in Scripture. On the contrary, it is written, in later periods of time some will fall away from the faith. Forbidding to marry. 1-4. 1-3 Notably, many or most of the apostles were married men. 1 Cor 9. 5 What keeps those with the gift of singleness from marrying need not be a vow of celibacy, but their desire and ability to apply themselves to the service of God in the single state. Shinim, land of Sinim. A country from which, it was foretold, scattered Israelites would come when the time arrived for them to dwell in and rehabilitate their homeland. Isra 49. 12 Reference to the N and W in the same verse suggests that Shinim was Esori of the land of Israel. Instead of Shinim, the Greek Septuagint reads land of the Persians, which could include Elam, called Sinim in Old Akkadian. Compare Isra 11. 11. The Targums and the Latin Vulgate, on the other hand, read land to the south. Certain scholars have suggested identification with Sin as 30. 6 in the southern extremity of Egypt. But Shinim's location is uncertain. Shinat Semite, a branch of Canaan's descendants, and one of the 70 post-flood families. GE 10. 15, 17. 1ch1. 15 Several Lebanese locations of similar name are noted in various ancient writings, but the exact place where the Shinats settled remains uncertain. Sin offering. Sea offerings. Shon Sion Excellency. Another, perhaps older, name for Mount Hermon. De 4. 48 Shon not Zion, like the Amorite name Senir, may have designated a particular part of Mount Hermon. Compare to 3. 9. 1ch5. 23. K4. 8. See Hermon. Sipmoth. A Judean city to which David sent a gift blessing of the spoils of his victory over the Amalekites. While a fugitive, he and his men had free access to the city. 1-30. 26-31 Its location is today unknown. Compare 1ch27. 27. O textoi acute muritra longo, Sistrum 975 Psalm 29. 6 Syrian and Lebanon are mentioned together. For this reason it has been suggested that Syrian perhaps refers to the Ander-Lebanon range. See Hermon. Sisera Sisi Middle.Ra. 1. Army chief under Canaanite King Jabin. Sisera, who lived at Harosheth rather than at Jabin's city Hazor, is more prominent in the account than King Jabin. Sometime after Judge Ehud had overthrown Moabite domination, Sisera and Jabin came to oppress Israel for 20 years. JG 4. 1-3. 1-12. 9. On hearing that Deborah and Barak had mustered the Israelites to fight against him, Sisera collected his forces, including his 900 iron-scythed chariots, and confronted Israel at the torrent valley of Kishon. But Jehovah fought against Sisera and threw his whole army into confusion, resulting in their total defeat. JG 4. 7, 12-16, 23. 5. 20, 21. PS 83. 9. His chariots bogged down. Compare JG 5. 21, and Sisera fled on foot, coming to the tent of Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, who was at peace with Jabin. She invited him inside. Exhausted from the battle and the flight, the weary Sisera, depending on the safety of Yael's tent, decided to rest. Yael gave Sisera some milk to drink, and he asked her to stand guard. When he had fallen into a sound sleep, she stealthily went up to him and drove a tent pin through his temples into the earth. When Barak arrived, Yael presented to him the fallen enemy. JG 4. 9, 17-22. 5. 25-27 Sisera's mother and her household waited in vain for him to return with great spoil. JG 5. 28-30. 2. Forefather of a family of Nethinim that returned to Jerusalem with Zerubbabel in 537 BCE as 2. 1, 2, 43, 53. NE 7. 55 war captives were included among the Nethinim, and while some may have been taken at the time Sisera number 1 was defeated and may have become temple servants, there is no reason to conclude that the Nethinim who returned from Babylon were descendants of the Sisera of Barak's time. Sismai, a descendant of Judah through Jerahmeel and Shishon, son of Eliezer and father of Shalom. 1 Ch 2. 3-5, 25, 34, 40 Sismai possibly lived during the period of the Judges. Sister. In the scriptures the term is applied to full sisters and to half-sisters, those having the same father but different mothers. GE 34. 1, 27. 1 Ch 3. 1-9, or the same mother but different fathers, as in the case of the sisters of Jesus. Mount 13. 55, 56. Mr. 6. 3. Some of Adam's sons obviously married their sisters, since all humankind sprang from Adam and Eve. GE 3. 20. 5. For Adam's wife Eve, as bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh, was even more closely related than a sister. GE 2. 22-24 There was no stigma attached to marriage to sisters or half-sisters. The account reports that more than 2,000 years later, Abraham married Sarah his half-sister. GE 20. 2, 12 The Mosaic Law, some 430 years later, however, forbade such unions as incestuous. Law 18. 9, 11. 20. 17 Doubtless, as the human race deteriorated from Adam's original perfection, it became detrimental for closely related persons to marry. Sister in its broader usage included fellow countrywoman of a nation. New 25. 17. 18 nations or cities that had a close relationship or that carried on similar moral practices were likened to sisters. J 3. 7-10. S 16. 46, 48, 49, 55. 23. 32, 33. The Hebrew word for sister in Middle Dutch oath is translated the other when describing the placing of objects in relationship to corresponding pieces in the tabernacle and in Ezekiel's visions. X 26. 3, 5, 6, 17. As 1. 9, 23. 3. 13. In the Christian congregation, Jesus taught that spiritual relationships take priority over fleshly ones. Those women who did his Father's will were sisters held in higher regard than mere fleshly relations. Mount 12. 50. Mr. 3. 34, 35 One willing to sever earthly ties, if necessary, for the sake of the kingdom, will have 100-fold of sisters and other family relations now, plus everlasting life. O textoi acute muritra longo, Cir 3 976 Instrument varied from about 20 to 46 centimeters 8 to 18 inches in length, according to extant ancient specimens as well as Egyptian and other monumental representations. The frame loosely held a small number of metal crossbars that, when shaken, produced sharp, ringing sounds. The horizontal bars may have been of differing lengths so as to produce a series of tones. Another type of sistrum was equipped with rings on the bars, and these rings jingled when agitated. Although its single biblical appearance is in the description of a great celebration, traditional Jewish sources state that the sistrum was played on sad occasions as well. Sithri Sithri Jehovah is my hiding place. Jehovah is my place of concealment. Elvite living during the Israelite slavery in Egypt. Son of Uzziel and cousin of Moses. X 6. 18, 20, 22. Sitnar accusation. A well that Isaac's servants dug in the vicinity of Jer and Haboth. It was named Sitna because of their dispute over it with the shepherds of Dura. GE 26. 19-22 It was perhaps somewhere in Wadi Ruwa ibn al-Shanra, about 30 kilometers 19 miles of Beersheba. But Sitna's exact location is not known. 7 Sivan. The post-exilic name of the third Jewish lunar month of the sacred calendar, but the ninth of the secular calendar. As 8. 9. 1 ch 27. 5. 2 ch 31. 7 It corresponds to part of May and part of June. The meaning of the name is uncertain. Sivan comes at the end of the spring when the intense heat of summer is approaching. It was the time of the wheat harvest and also the early part of the dry season, which would continue until about mid-October or the lunar month Bull. X 34. 22. PR 26. When this was doubtless the month when the prophet Samuel prayed to Jehovah and an unseasonal rainstorm occurred, causing great fear among the people. 1 12. 16-19 By now the early figs that came on the trees toward the close of the winter months were fully ripe. Issa 28. 4. J 24. 2 In the coastal area of the Mediterranean, apples were also in season. K 2. 3. Compare J 1. 10-12. The Festival of Weeks, or Pentecost, was celebrated on the 6th day of Sivan, accompanied by the offering of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, on the 50th day after the offering of the first fruits of the barley harvest. X 34. 22. La 23. 15-21 It was on this 6th day of Sivan, in the year 33 CE that the Holy Spirit was poured out on the group of about 120 disciples assembled in the upper room at Jerusalem. From the crowds gathered at the city for the feast came the 3,000 persons who were baptized on that day. Ac 1. 15. 2. 1-42. It was in the month of Sivan that King Asa celebrated a grand feast following his reform activity in eradicating false religion from Judah, Jerusalem, and other areas. 2 ch 15. 8-10 The swift couriers sent by King Ahasuerus to deliver the message granting the Jews the right to defend themselves on the 13th day of Adar were dispatched almost 9 months earlier, on the 23rd day of Sivan, to the 127 jurisdictional districts of the Persian Empire extending from India to Ethiopia. As 8. 9-14. 6. See number, numeral. Skin. The external layer of the body of a human or an animal. The skin is classified as an organ of the body, and indeed it performs many functions for the body's well-being, including protection, regulation of body temperature, and removal of certain waste materials. The Bible mentions skin afflictions with 13. 1-46. 21. 20. 28. 27 Uncertain deteriorating effects of disease and starvation upon the skin. Job 7. 5. 30. 30. Bar 4. 8. 5. 10. According to the law, skins of animals used for certain sin offerings were burned outside the camp of Israel, or outside the gate of Jerusalem. X 29. 14. Before. 11, 12. 8. 17. 9. 11. 16. 27. Heb 13. 11 The priest received the skin of an animal presented by an Israelite for a burnt offering. 7. 8. Jehovah provided skin garments for Adam and Eve to otex to acute miritra longo. Slave 977 Job, himself said, I escape with the skin of my teeth. Job 19. 20 other readings of the above scripture have been proposed by translators, but these require adjustments in the Hebrew text. It does not seem to be necessary to endeavor to explain Job's statement in the light of discoveries that scientists have made in recent times with the aid of microscopes. It seems that Job was simply saying that he had escaped with nothing or with next to nothing. He had escaped with the skin of his teeth, that is, with the skin of what apparently has no skin. Skull Place. See Golgotha. Sky. Sky Heb. Shachak, as used by the Bible writers, may mean the expanse of atmosphere that surrounds the Earth in which clouds float. ISO 45. 8. Or it may mean the apparent vault or dome over the Earth that is blue in the daytime and star-studded at night. PS 89. 37. In most cases the writer evidently is merely referring to what is high above man without specifying which aspect of the sky is involved. PS 57. 10. 108. 4. The fine dust particles in the atmosphere, the molecules of water vapor, and, to some extent, the molecules of other gases in the atmosphere, such as oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide, scatter the rays of light, the blue rays being most diffused, which gives the clear sky its characteristic blue color. Fine dust particles also play a large part in producing clouds, the water vapor collecting around these particles. The Hebrew word shachak sky is also translated film of dust, cloud, cloudy sky. It is apparently from a root meaning pound fine. 2:22. 43. Jehovah speaks of himself as the one who beat out the skies hard like a molten mirror. Job 37. 18. The particles forming the atmosphere are indeed compressed under the pull of gravity, and their outer limits are within set boundaries, gravity preventing their escape from the earth. G1. 6-8. They do reflect the sunlight in a manner comparable to a mirror. Because of this the sky looks bright, whereas without an atmosphere an observer on the earth would see only blackness in the sky, with the heavenly bodies glowing brilliantly on a black background, as is the case with the atmosphereless moon. Astronauts can observe the Earth's atmosphere from outer space as an illuminated, glowing halo. Jehovah used figurative language in warning Israel that, for disobedience, the skies overhead would become copper and the earth beneath, iron, and powder and dust would be the rain of their land. Doubtless under such conditions of lack of rain the shut-up, cloudless skies would become reddish, copper, in color, because increased dust particles in the atmosphere tend to diffuse the blue light to the point that the red waves are more prominent, just as the setting sun appears red, because of the greater depth or thickness of atmosphere that the sun's rays must traverse. De 28. 23, 24. Compare 1 Chi 8. 35, where heaven is used as referring to the expanse. Another Hebrew word occasionally rendered skies is shamidl.mayim heavens. De 28. 23. Similarly, the Greek middle.numbers, literally heaven, is also translated sky. When Jesus ascended toward heaven, a cloud caught him away from the disciples' vision. As they gazed into the sky, angels appeared and said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into the sky? This Jesus who was received up from you into the sky will come thus in the same manner as you have beheld him going into the sky." Act 1. 9-11, FTN. The angels, in effect, told the disciples that there was no point in their gazing into the sky, expecting him to appear to their vision there. For the cloud had caught him up, and he had become invisible. But he would come back in like manner, invisibly, unobserved by their physical eyes. Occasionally, sky is used in parallel with heaven. See heaven. Slander. See gossip, slander. Slap. See attitudes and gestures. Slave. The original language words rendered o textoi acute miritra longo, slave 978. God's servant, an example being King Nebuchadnezzar. J 27. 6. The Greek term doulos corresponds to the Hebrew word evdh. It is used with reference to persons owned by fellowmen. Mount 8. 9. 10. 24, 25. 13. 27. Devoted servants of God and of his Son Jesus Christ, with a human act 2. 18. 4. 29. Row 1. 1. Go 1. 10 or angelic ray 19. 10, where the word sin-do middle.los fellow slave appears. And, in a figurative sense, to persons in slavery to sin. J 8. 34. Row 6. 16-20 or corruption 2 PE 2. 19. The Hebrew word na'ah, like the Greek term pays, basically means a boy or a youth and can also designate a servant or an attendant. Once a 1. 24. 4. 21. 30. 17. 2 Chi 5. 20. Mount 2. 16. 8. 6. 17. 18. 21. 15. Act 20. 12. The Greek term oimiddle.kets denotes a house servant or slave. Lu 16. 13. And a female slave or servant is designated by the Greek word pymiddle.diske. Lu 12. 45. The participial form of the Hebrew root shamiddle.wrath may be rendered by such terms as minister x 33. 11. Or waiter. 2 So 13. 18. The Greek word high-middle.p-middle.rtes may be translated attendant, court attendant, or house attendant. Mount 26. 58. Mr. 14. 54, 65. Joe 18. 36. The Greek term the middle.rapon occurs solely at Hebrews 3. 5 and means subordinate or attendant. Before the Common Era, war, poverty, and crime were the basic factors that reduced persons to a state of servitude. Captives of war were often constituted slaves by their captors or were sold into slavery by them. Compare to Chi 5. 2. Joe 3. 6. In Israelite society, a person who became poor could sell himself or his children into slavery to care for his indebtedness. X 21. 7. La 25. 39, 47. 2 Chi 4. 1 guilty of thievery, but unable to make compensation, was sold for the things he stole, evidently regaining his freedom at the time all claims against him were cared for. X 22. 3. At times slaves held a position of great trust and honor in a household. The patriarch Abraham's aged servant likely Eliezer managed all of his master's possessions. GE 24. 2. 15. 2, 3. Abraham's descendant Joseph, as a slave in Egypt, came to be in charge of everything belonging to Potiphar, a court official of Pharaoh. GE 39. 1, 5, 6. In Israel, there was a possibility of a slave's becoming wealthy and redeeming himself. La 25. 49. Regarding conscription of workers, see compulsory service. Forced labor. Laws governing slave-master relationships. Among the Israelites, the status of the Hebrew slave differed from that of a slave who was a foreigner, alien resident, or settler. Whereas the non-Hebrew remained the property of the owner and could be passed on from father to son. La 25. 44-46, the Hebrew slave was to be released in the 7th year of his servitude or in the Jubilee year, depending upon which came first. During the time of his servitude, the Hebrew slave was to be treated as a hired laborer. X 21. 2. La 25. 10. La 15. 12. A Hebrew who sold himself into slavery to an alien resident, to a member of an alien resident's family, or to a settler could be repurchased at any time, either by himself or by one having the right of repurchase. The redemption price was based on the number of years remaining until the Jubilee year or until the 7th year of servitude. La 25. 47-52. La 15. 12. When granting a Hebrew slave his freedom, the master was to give him a gift to assist him in getting a good start as a freedman. La 15. 13-15. If a slave had come in with a wife, the wife went out with him. However, if the master had given him a wife, evidently a foreign woman who would not be entitled to freedom in the 7th year of servitude, she and any children by her remained the property of the master. In such a case the Hebrew slave could choose to remain with his master. His ear would then be pierced with an awl to indicate that he would continue in servitude to time indefinite. X 21. 2-6. La 15. 16, 17. Female Hebrew slaves. Certain special regulations applied to a female Otextoi acute Muritra Longo, slave 979, had to kill the slave but to discipline him. He was not to be avenged. X 21. 20, 21, 26, 27. La 24. 17. Also, it would appear that for the master to have been considered free of guilt, the beating could not have been administered with a lethal instrument, as that would have signified intent to kill. Compare New 35. 16-18. Therefore, if a slave lingered on for a day or two, there would be reasonable question as to whether the death resulted from the chastisement. A beating with a rod, for example, would not normally be fatal, as is shown by the statement at Proverbs 23. 13. Do not hold back discipline from the mere boy. In case you beat him with the rod, he will not die. Certain privileges were granted to slaves by the terms of the law. As all male slaves were circumcised X 12. 44. Compare GE 17. 12. They could eat the Passover, and slaves of the priest could eat holy things. X 12. 43, 44. 22. 10. 11 slaves were exempted from working on the Sabbath. X 20. 10. 5. 14. During the Sabbath year they were entitled to eat of the growth from spilled kernels and from the unpruned vine. 25. 5. 6. They were to share in the rejoicing associated with the sacrificing at the sanctuary and the celebration of the festivals. 12. 12. 16. 11, 14. First century Christian position. In the Roman Empire slaves were very numerous, with individuals owning hundreds and even thousands of slaves. The institution of slavery had the protection of the imperial government. First century Christians did not take a stand against governmental authority in this matter and advocate a slave's revolt. They respected the legal right of others, including fellow Christians, to own slaves. That is why the Apostle Paul sent back the runaway slave Onesimus. Because he had become a Christian, Onesimus willingly returned to his master, subjecting himself as a slave to a fellow Christian. PHM 10-17. The Apostle Paul also admonished Christian slaves not to take improper advantage of their relationship with believing masters. He said, "Let those having believing owners not look down on them, because they are brothers. On the contrary, let them the more readily be slaves, because those receiving the benefit of their good service are believers and beloved." 1T6. 2. For a slave to have a Christian master was a blessing, as his owner was under obligation to deal righteously and fairly with him. F6. 9. Call 4. 1. The acceptance of Christianity by those in servitude placed upon them the responsibility of being better slaves, not talking back, not committing theft, but exhibiting good fidelity. 2. 9, 10. Even if their masters treated them unjustly, they were not to render inferior service. By suffering for righteousness' sake, they imitated the example of Jesus Christ. 1 Pe 2. 18-25. You slaves, wrote the Apostle Paul, be obedient in everything to those who are your masters in a fleshly sense, not with acts of eye service, as men pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, with fear of Jehovah. Whatever you are doing, work at it whole-souled as to Jehovah, and not to men. Col 3. 22, 23. F6. 5-8. Such fine conduct toward their masters prevented bringing reproach upon the name of God, as no one could blame Christianity for producing lazy, good-for-nothing slaves. 1T6. 1. Of course, a slave's obedience in everything could not include disobeying God's law, as that would have meant fearing men rather than God. Wrongdoing by slaves, even when committed at the direction of a superior, would not have adorned the teaching of their Savior, God, but would have misrepresented and disgraced this teaching. 2. 10. Thus, their Christian conscience would govern. In the Christian congregation all persons, regardless of their social status, enjoyed the same standing. All were anointed by the same Spirit and thus shared in the same hope as members of one body. 1 Co 12. 12, 13. 3. 28. Col 3. 11. While o textoi acute miritra longo, sledge 980. Only by availing themselves of the deliverance made possible through Jesus Christ could individuals be emancipated or gain freedom from this enslavement. Compare Jo 8. 31-34. Row 7. 21-25. 4. 1-7. Heb 2. 14-16. See ransom. Having been bought with the precious blood of Jesus, Christians are slaves, or servants, of Jehovah God and of His Son, obligated to keep their commands. 1 Cor 7. 22, 23. 1 P 1. 18, 19. Re 19. 1, 2, 5. See Freedman, Freeman. Freedom. See also faithful and discreet slave. Sledge. See farming implements. Sleep. A period of rest marked by the cessation of conscious activity. It is vital for the maintenance of human life and health. Being fully aware of the importance of rest, Jesus Christ was concerned about His disciples having time to rest up a bit. Mr. 6. 31 Jesus' example shows that, even in human perfection, rest and sleep are necessary. Compare Mr. 4. 38. Hard work EC 5. 12. A clear conscience compare PS 32. 3-5, and freedom from undue anxiety as well as trust in Jehovah PS 3. 5. 4. 8. PR 3. 24-26 contribute much toward making an individual's sleep pleasurable and refreshing. Content with life's necessities compare 1T6. 8. The servant of God does not have to spend long hours in arduous toil to the point of sacrificing necessary sleep and still derive no real benefit from his work. Compare PS 127. 1, 2. Of course, there are times when God's servants experience sleepless nights. If not due to sickness or other adverse or trialsome circumstances, their sleeplessness may stem from concern for fellow believers and the advancement of true worship. 2 Cor 6. 3-5. 11. 23, 27. Compare PS 132. 3-5, where the reference is, not to actual sleep, but to rest, cessation from activity. However, they do not need to worry needlessly about material possessions and lose sleep as a result. EC 5. 12. Compare Mount 6. 25-34. On the other hand, wrongdoing serves to make wicked persons content. They do not sleep unless they do badness, and their sleep has been snatched away unless they cause someone to stumble. PR 4. 16. While sleep is important, a person should not become a lover of sleep. PR 20. 13. Laziness causes a deep sleep to fall, making an individual inactive when he should be accomplishing something. PR 19. 15. For a person to prefer to sleep or to be inactive when he should be working is to choose a course that eventually leads to poverty. PR 6. 9-11. 10. 5. 24. 33, 34. Unlike men, Jehovah God does not become drowsy and require sleep. His servants, therefore, can rest assured that He can at all times supply needed help. PS 121. 3, 4. Only when, for His own good reasons, He delays or refrains from taking action, as in relation to those professing to be His people, but proving to be unfaithful, is Jehovah likened to one who is asleep. PS 44. 23. 78. 65. Spiritual wakefulness. When encouraging Christians at Rome not to be asleep or inactive and insensible to their responsibilities, the Apostle Paul wrote, "It is already the hour for you to awake from sleep, for now our salvation is nearer than at the time when we became believers. The night is well along. The day has drawn near. Let us therefore put off the works belonging to darkness, and let us put on the weapons of the light. As in the daytime let us walk decently, not in revelries and drunken bouts, not in illicit intercourse and loose conduct, not in strife and jealousy." Ro 13. 11-13. Compare F5. 6-14. 1th 6-8. Re 16. 15. Those who engage in wrong practices or advance false teachings are asleep as to righteousness and need to wake up if they are to gain God's approval. Death compared with sleep. There is evidence that people sleep in cycles. Each cycle is made up of a deep sleep followed by lighter sleep. During periods of deep sleep it is very difficult to awaken a person. He is completely unaware of his surroundings and the things that may be occurring about him. There is no o textoi acute muritra longo, smoke 981. It should be noted that the term sleep is applied in the scriptures to those dying because of the death passed on from Adam. Those suffering the second death are not spoken of as asleep. Rather, they are shown to be completely annihilated, out of existence, burned up as by an unquenchable fire. Read 20. 14, 15. Compare Heb 10. 26-31, where a contrast is made between the death of those who violated the Mosaic law and the much more severe punishment meted out to Christians who turn to a willful practice of sin. Heb 6. 4-8. Sling. See arms, armor. Slinger. A person who hurls missiles from a sling. The sling was usually a relatively short strap that was doubled over and whirled around. From it a missile, such as a stone, was propelled at high speed by releasing one end of the strap. In early times, slingers of stones formed an important part of a military force. The tribe of Benjamin had 700 picked men, every one of whom was a slinger of stones to a hairbreadth and would not miss. JG 20. 15, 16. The Targums say that the Cherethites and the Peletites among David's warriors were adept slingers. Slingmen were an important part of King Uzziah's military force. 2ch 26. 13, 14. Sennacherib employed a corps of slingers in the Assyrian army, as monuments attest. The fighting forces of the Egyptians, Syrians, Persians, Sicilians, and others also had similar divisions. In the Roman army, slingers were among the auxilia. As late as the 1st century CE, Josephus relates that Jewish slingers pitted their skill against Roman forces. Jewish Antiquities, 17, 259x, 2. The Jewish War, 2, 422, 423 17, 5. IV, 14, 15I, 3. In ancient armies the slingers usually made up only one division of the foot soldiers. Archers, as a complement of the slingers, and a smaller number of spearmen completed the infantry. When called forward to begin an engagement or to stall an enemy advance, the slingers passed from the rear of the ranks through corridors among the soldiers. At other times they fired from behind, over the heads of the spearmen. Slingers were especially effective fighters when attacking walled cities. Their missiles, hurled from the ground, could pick the enemy off the walls or reach targets inside the city. 2 Chi 3. 25. When siege engines and assault towers were developed, slingers took advantage of the elevated positions their platforms afforded. An advantage of the slinger over the armor-clad swordsman or spearman was his effectiveness from a distance. It is claimed that their range of effectiveness was up to 122 meters, 400 feet with stones, and even farther with lead pellets. David's use of the sling. Much time and training was required to become a skilled and experienced slinger. Young shepherd boys attending and protecting flocks against beasts of prey developed the needed skill. The shepherd boy David felt much better equipped with his sling than with the heavy armor of Saul. But he doubtless would have been unable to stand before Goliath without faith in Jehovah and strength from him. The outcome of the fight depended, not on superiority of weapons or upon skill, but upon Jehovah, who supported David. As David called out to Goliath, "I am coming to you with the name of Jehovah of armies, whom you have taunted." And all this congregation will know that neither with sword nor with spear does Jehovah save, because to Jehovah belongs the battle. It was a stone from David's sling, no doubt guided and given unusual force by Jehovah, that sank into Goliath's forehead, striking him down so that David could definitely put him to death by Goliath's own sword. 1 17. 38-51. Smoke. The visible soup-producing mixture of carbon particles and gases from burning organic materials. Also vapor or a cloud resembling smoke. Aside from the mention of literal smoke, Heb. Ashen. Gr. Committal. Knows in numerous instances, there are a number of figurative uses of the o textoi acute muritra longo, Smyrna 982. Consequently, a rising column or cloud of smoke came to be used symbolically as a token of warning, a portent of woe to come or of destruction. Re 9. 2-4. Compare Job 2. 30, 31. Act 2. 19, 20. Re 9. 17, 18. The psalmist says of the wicked, in smoke they must come to their end. PS 37. 20. Smoke also symbolized the evidence of destruction. Re 18. 9, 18. Smoke that keeps ascending to time indefinite therefore is evidently an expression denoting complete and everlasting annihilation, as in Isaiah's prophecy against Edom. To time indefinite its smoke will keep ascending. Issa 34. 5, 10. Edom as a nation was wiped out and remains desolated to this day, and the evidence of this fact stands in the Bible account and in the records of secular history. Similarly, the everlasting destruction of Babylon the Great is foretold at Revelation 18. 8, and a like judgment is entered against those who worship the wild beast and its image, at Revelation 14. 9-11. Other illustrative uses. Just as smoke normally dissipates quickly and disappears, so it sometimes figuratively denotes that which is transitory. It is used with regard to God's enemies. PS 68. 2. Idol worshippers. Ho 13. 3. And the shortened life of the afflicted one. PS 102. 3. As vinegar to the teeth and as smoke to the eyes, so the lazy man is to those sending him forth, says the proverb. Just as smoke causes the eyes to sting and smart, so the one who employs a lazy man does so to the injury of his own purposes. PR 10. 26. The psalmist, waiting for Jehovah to comfort him, says, I have become like a skin bottle in the smoke. PS 119. 83. Skin bottles, such as those used in the Middle East, hanging on the wall when not in use, became dried up and shriveled from the smoke of the house. So the psalmist had become at the hands of those persecuting him. Jehovah, in describing his creations to Job, calls attention to Leviathan, saying, out of its nostrils smoke goes forth, like a furnace set aflame even with rushes. Job 41. 20. Many Bible scholars believe that God here had reference to the crocodile, which, when coming up out of the water, breathes out a thick, steamy vapor with a thundering sound. Sacrificial smoke. Another Hebrew word, kamidal.tar, has reference to making sacrificial smoke, whether that of incense or of another sacrifice on the altar. 1 Ch 6. 49. J 44. 15. Such sacrificial smoke was viewed as a pleasing odor ascending to the one to whom it was offered. G 8. 20, 21. L 26. 31. F 5. 2. Smyrna. Smyrna, an ancient city on the W coast of Asia Minor, now called Izmir. Picture, Volume 2, p. 946. Early settled by the Greeks, it was destroyed about 580 BCE by Lydian Kingalites. More than 2 centuries later, Alexander the Great planned to rebuild it as a Greek city, this being done by his successors on another site. Smyrna thereafter became an important commercial city. When it became part of the Roman province of Asia, Smyrna, with its fine public buildings, was noted for its beauty. It had a temple of Tiberius Caesar and therefore promoted emperor worship. Smyrna was the second of the 7 Christian congregations in Asia Minor to which the glorified Jesus Christ directed the Apostle John to write a message. Re 1. 11. The congregation was said to be poor materially but rich spiritually. It was tested by tribulation, evidently persecution, and was blasphemed by some who called themselves Jews, but who were actually a synagogue of Satan. However, despite their poverty and tribulation, Christians of the congregation in Smyrna were encouraged not to fear the things they would yet suffer but to be faithful even to death in order to receive the crown of life. Re 2. 8-11. Snailheb. Shabmiddle.Balal. Any of a variety of slow-moving mollusks, generally distinguished by their spiral or conical shells into which they can withdraw for protection. Numerous varieties of snails have been Otextoia acute Muritra longo, Saburnus 983 Jerusalem. Compare 2 Sa 23. 20. 1 Ch 11. 22. During most of the year there is snow in the heights and ravines of the Lebanon Range. Lofty Mount Hermon is snow-capped nearly all year long. 18. 14 Psalm 60.